Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima reminds me a lot of Guerrilla's Horizon Zero Dawn in that it's a game that is vastly different to the studio's previous work, and by that metric is surprising in just how compelling it is. To change direction in such a way from games like Sly and Infamous to something like Ghost of Tsushima and stick the landing is pretty remarkable, and as much as the comments on my Horizon video try to argue with me, it is unexpected for such a dramatic shift in direction to be so successful. It's one of the reasons I'm still naively gunning for the Fable reboot to work, because to go from an open-world multiplayer arcade racer to a single-player medieval fantasy action RPG would be a really cathartic win, although I'll concede it's not looking great. Ghost of Tsushima sits in a specific part of my brain. It's a game that is both like no other yet simultaneously identical to 500 other games I've played, and it leaves it as a game that is kind of wasted potential. That's not to say it's bad and they fucked it all up, that's not what I'm saying. It's a really great game, yet still doesn't reach its full potential. But I kind of think that's a good thing. It means Tsushima works as a competent yet not fully realised vision, and allows for iteration and evolution in a way masterpieces like God of War 2018 don't. If you hit perfection on the first try, your sequel is going to be an uphill battle. That's not why Ragnarok wasn't very good, as I've explored, but it certainly didn't help. Revisiting Tsushima before Yotei was crucial for me, essential even, because it reminded me of why Ghost needed and deserved another game. For years, Ghost lived in my head as, like the kids say, mid. It was fine, not bad, not the greatest game of all time, just alright. But the thing is, Ghost isn't consistently fine. It's both incredible and messy. It's got high highs and low lows, and I think that makes it interesting to explore. There is so much to love, but so much in dire need of critique, and it won't be long before we're able to reflect on this video and see if Yotei responded to any of that criticism. So, let's give it a look.
Tradition, courage, honor, they are what make us.
The opening of this game is kind of perfect. It gets us right into things while also easing us into things. The short cutscene establishes the stakes, it establishes Jin Sakai's perspective on the fight to push back the Mongols, but most importantly, it establishes Shimura's intrinsic morals. Who Shimura is and what that means to Jin is central to the game's thematic core, and here we get everything laid bare in a context that is celebratory. Look at the samurai, these mighty warrior heroes we know from history. That's the way Jin sees them, and he puts so much stock in his uncle's words. It's why he's willing here to ride into battle. But the willingness to give his life for Tsushima, for his people, is wholly his own. We learn this from Jin's own internal monologue, entirely in his head, whereas Shimura's is loud and bombastic and public. I think this does wonders to establish them both. Jin is someone who is far more concerned with how his actions impact the world. Shimura is far more concerned with how his actions impact his place in the world. It's more nuanced than that, but thematically that's where they sit, and their internal ideologies are diametrically opposed, and this battle is the instigator in setting off that powder keg of character drama. The Komodo Beach battle is not just visually and presentationally wonderful at conveying the chaos and destruction of war, but also mechanically it does it too. The game does not take time to teach you the gameplay mechanics until after this section, meaning you feel the chaos. You don't know what the fuck you're doing, you're scrambling to kill these guys and stay alive. You are so out of your depth, and I love that shit. It makes me look like a 4-year-old with a controller in this footage, but I promise it's all part of the artistic intent. Your experience mirrors Jin's here. You are confused and lost and fighting for your life, but this also gives us insight into our enemy. They are an affront to our humanity, the simple principles that underpin our way of life, but they aren't the only enemy. They aren't the only force threatening the simple humanity of the people. But we'll get to that. Jin is beaten down, stabbed, and impaled with arrows as he watches his uncle, the stoic Lord Shimura, cut down by the Mongol leader Kutan Khan, who gives us expositional dialogue on his family ties so that we're aware he is in fact related to the Genghis we all know and... No, just don't look it up, he is real and exists. From this, we cut to Jin Sakai, on the ground of the burning field of battle, his sword planted in the ground beside him like something of a memorial. I think this is deeply intentional symbolism, along with his armor, a symbol of tradition, courage, and honor, broken. As you press X, he begins to wake. Jin Sakai, the samurai, died on that beach, but his ghost rises. Leaving the beach and making our way through the nearby town of Komeda, now infested with Mongols, we bump into our first major character in Yuna, who is the strongest catalyst for Jin's growth, and honestly, I don't think it's a coincidence that she's a woman. Iki Island deals with this far more overtly, using Jin's own experience growing up and the expectations placed on him by male figures like his father and Shimura. Jin's stronger connection to his mother's way of living and who he truly is at his core is nurtured by Yuna in a way that it hadn't been since he was a child, and I think that's a core part of his evolution across the game. It's not that Jin was a samurai who became the ghost, that's only how it seems. Jin becoming the ghost is more about Jin embracing his own true inner self that was always there. Yuna does a dishonorable kill, Jin is taken aback, but he trusts her regardless, showing his openness to her ways. He's not as rigid as his uncle, and they head to retrieve his katana. It's here Jin explains who he is, that he's the Jito's nephew, which Yuna is a little unhappy about, sowing the seeds of a dislike for the powers that rule the regular people. But more than that, it shows us both how much Jin believes in his uncle as well as needs him. He values that familial bond. He says as much.
Lord Shimura can help our whole island. And he's the only family I have left.
Which makes it all the more powerful when Jin has to eventually stand against him. But it's not just talk. When we reach the sword, we get a flashback. We see why Jin has such faith in Shimura. The man we see in his memories is caring, he's kind, he seems to genuinely want the best for the people of Tsushima and for Jin. However, there's a twinge of what we saw at the very start, of self-image or ego and pride above pragmatism. When he asks Jin what honor means to him personally, Jin's response is simple.
I guess protecting people.
Shimura, however, despite appreciating Jin's good heart, says,
But first, we must show everyone that we serve our Lord with courage, integrity, and self-control. We must set an example for our people by remaining true to our code.
That they must set an example for their people. Shimura, despite how much he obviously wants the best for the people, does believe he's better than them, and that his honor trounces their need for protection, if it has to come to that. And in this game, it does, and Jin's good heart has to confront that. This flashback is also when we learn combat. I'm planning to discuss combat mechanically later in the video, as well as a bunch of other things. If I haven't mentioned it, it's because I'm probably planning to talk about it later. I just want to get the prologue covered first, before we worry about the ins and outs of gameplay. I will say though, I decided to play this game on lethal mode. I'd heard good things, and the game is a totally different experience. I don't knock any way you decide to play. There are options for a reason, and it's ultimately going to come down to personal preference, but I think there's a good case to be made for lethal being the ideal way to play artistically, especially with how well the moment-to-moment gameplay mirrors what the narrative explores. There's a level of synchronization that I admire. The difficulty in facing the Mongols with samurai honor is very fucking hard, and so the game actively requires using tools and stealth and other means to win, which puts the player's experience hand in hand with Jin's own need to resort to dirty tactics, and I love that. The castle was a fucking gauntlet. I struggled here so much, and I loved it. When I got thrown off the bridge by the famous historical figure Kutan Khan, I felt like I was beaten down, like the samurai code was just not going to cut it. After his fall, Jin recalls another memory, the night his father was killed on Iki Island. The specifics are more nuanced, and I'm not going to discuss that right now, we'll do that in its own chapter, but this was a moment Jin feels great regret for, guilt even. He believes he failed. Despite being a child, he couldn't save his father. I do think crawling towards your child's son as murderers kill your men and you, begging for his help, is a little low. I mean, come on man, he's basically a baby. I think you've got to protect your son and take the L here if we're being real with ourselves. But the dialogue, "May your death benefit all beings," is pretty fucking poignant, and doesn't get truly unpacked until the DLC, although it speaks to something that is a running thread throughout the game. A lot of people don't actually like the samurai. For what reason? Well, let's keep on going. We see Jin take up his father's sword to continue his legacy. That weight weighs heavy, but it's also a guiding wind that is malleable and free-flowing and bends in ways that Shimura will not. As Jin wakes, he walks from the waters onto the beach. Water and fire both have similar symbolic meaning in art, rebirth. But where fire is usually used to remove rot or find clarity, to destroy what was to make way for the new, water is more of a process. It's a baptism, one that cleanses and carries you forth into what follows. Jin died on that beach in flame and chaos, and now he is reborn from the waters beneath Castle Canada. Jin regroups with Yuna, and she says some words that I think resonate in Jin's very core and that reverberate across the game.
You forgot what it's like to fight someone stronger than you. To feel weak. Sometimes when you're staring death in the face, you have to do whatever it takes to survive.
At first, when I was playing, I thought that Jin accepting that this early, that the Khan expects to fight a war against the samurai and they'd have to find new ways to surprise him, was a bit sudden, that maybe the development should have happened more gradually, but actually, I don't believe that now. Watching this back and writing about this game, I think this makes perfect sense. Jin already believed this. He already cared far more about the people of his home than the honor that his uncle held so sacred. The development, the thing that he has to grapple with, is his relationship with his uncle, his family history, and his own morality when committing the acts that he does. That's the true struggle, not whether he should or shouldn't change, the conflict that comes from accepting that change is necessary. Jin believes he failed his father. He won't fail his uncle. He won't fail Tsushima, and so he is ready to do whatever he can to save whoever he can, and that is all set up so efficiently by the prologue's exploration of the Mongols, the war, Jin's own memories, and his meeting with Yuna. And with that, Jin agrees to help save Yuna's brother, and to gather allies, to form a group and to take back Castle Canada, so that Shimura can be saved, and thereby, to Jin, the people. And so begins Ghost of Tsushima. This is where Ghost opens up, and one of its most integral mechanics becomes accessible to you: exploration via the use of wind. Most open world games use markers that you traverse to either via a minimap or a compass. I think the compass kind of became popular as a remedy for the constant staring at minimaps players complained about, but it was just replaced by staring at a compass instead. It helps, but not entirely. The central problem remains, that you are following something rather than exploring based on vibes. This is something that Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring fixed by removing the need to follow markers and instead just follow your nose. I'm aware that Breath of the Wild still has a minimap, but the point is that it doesn't dictate where you go or what you explore. It's only a means to track and follow what you've decided might be interesting to go and check out. See a tower somewhere in the distance? Maybe it'll be prudent to head over and see what it is. Ghost sits somewhere between these two philosophies, because while its wind system is superior to a minimap or a compass, it is ultimately the exact same structurally and design-wise. You're still following a waypoint to a point of interest, it's just that now your eyes aren't glued to a piece of UI, and don't get me wrong, that is better. But it's not a fundamental shift in open-world design the way Elden Ring was, because removing any tools that will point your way means you have to design the world in a way that directs a player through its fundamental environment, using landmarks and terrain to guide the eye and thereby your interest. It's not that games with markers don't do this, they obviously do, but not having UI as a crutch at all means every aspect has to be deeply intentional. But I don't believe that Ghost was ever trying to revolutionize open-world design. I don't think it was actually attempting to do away with markers and be a profoundly different experience. I think it simply wanted to be a traditional open world with bells and whistles that alter the experience just enough to feel unique and not bogged down by some usual pain points that can cause boredom. And look, don't get me wrong, it has interesting ways of directing you around too. Different plumes of smoke mean different things. A wide spread of white steam indicates a hot spring, a thin white plume is usually a camp of survivors or maybe a small Mongol camp or sometimes a bamboo slicing game, and the big black smoke clouds are usually Mongol outposts. You've also got the birds that get stuck on everything they fly into and are useless but are supposed to direct you to points of interest, and foxes that are less organic but will simply guide you to little Inari shrines. Although they are very cute. And on top of that, the world generally is built in a way to push you into distraction, from climbing spots specifically placed to lead you somewhere new, or shrine gates that lead you towards a nearby shrine to climb. Everything is trying its best to avoid you opening that map, to just hang around in the actual game and just see what pops up. The world tries, and I think those things count and matter, and often do mean you're looking at the world far more than simply the map. The actual issue I find most prominent is something that has plagued open world design since The Witcher 3, and that's the question mark issue. I'm not really sure if this existed prior to The Witcher 3, because I can't recall an instance of this being the case. I think The Witcher 3 pioneered it, similar to Oppenheimer and the nuclear bomb, but that's undiscovered locations that are close by being marked by a question mark on your map. The idea is that instead of having map markers all over the place, like an older Assassin's Creed for example, this is still unbelievable. I think every time I use this image in a video, it gets more markers. Instead of this, where you head to a mission marker and then do the mission you've chosen to do, everything is a question mark until you arrive, meaning you don't know what it'll be, and it allows for a deeper sense of exploration. And while this is probably an improvement over the older formula, it raises another issue. Now you know if there isn't a question mark, there is nothing there. It actually does the opposite of create meaningful exploration, because you're keenly aware that if there isn't a question mark, it is dead space. And so, whilst the wind mechanic in Ghost is novel and feels immersive at first, after 15 hours, 25 hours, 35 hours, you really start to feel how much it's simply Assassin's Creed or The Witcher with a slightly different presentation. You are still following a waypoint to a question mark, which will be a shrine to climb, or a lighthouse to light, or a bamboo slicing game to play, or a bandit camp with objectives to tick off a list that adds to your bandit camp tracker in the pause menu. I know they're Mongol camps, but you're a fucking nerd if my wording matters here. Suck on them apples, bitch. I don't know. And so, as much as the question mark issue does rear its head, it's sometimes about how repetitive the actual thing you're doing can be too, and in Act 1, it's not really an issue. Despite wishing that maybe question marks weren't marked on the map, which would allow for far more organic exploration, and removing the checklisting of objectives to just give you a sense of freedom, the game still thrives. It is possibly the best traditional open world of this nature there is with regards to pure exploration, the act of wandering the world and stumbling upon things. I don't know if a game like this does this in a way that feels as strongly as Ghost does. I just wish the things that you engaged with at the locations were maybe a little more diverse and a little more interesting, which is where it really falls. Sure, The Witcher doesn't do exploration quite as well, it's far more rigid in the way you get around and follow markers, but the actual substance of the events at these locations is far and away superior, and I think that makes The Witcher 3 a better game, which really goes to show what Ghost did in how it presents its exploration maybe doesn't even matter long term, because it'll always come down to the actual things you are doing. Then again, Skyrim's writing is kinda rough in a lot of areas, it's not like the stories are deeply enthralling, but the game is carried by freedom and exploration and autonomy that makes you feel like everything you do is always driven by you. So I suppose that feeling can be a replacement for deeply meaningful substance. That said though, I think the way I played this go-around altered major aspects of that, because playing on lethal mode completely changed how I engaged with the game. Playing normal in 2020 was a fun time, but most of the rewards for completing objectives and discoverable locations felt kinda pointless. My charms only barely mattered, and my gear too. It's a far more casual experience, and honestly, if you're going to play on a traditional difficulty, I feel like it's better to just cut out the fluff and play on easy. Just tank through the game, cutting down guys and feeling badass. Normal doesn't add depth so much as it adds bloat, and hard just makes enemies spongy. Lethal, though, totally alters this. Enemies can only take a couple of hits, meaning fights never drag on, but you can also die in 2 or sometimes 1 hit as well. It makes every single item you get important. I found myself rummaging in random houses for supplies or iron, exploring around for hot springs for more of a reason than just getting a nice view, and bamboo slicing became essential because I needed that resolve to win encounters. On normal mode, all of these things were just stuff that I could do but didn't really need to do, whereas on lethal they became essential parts of the character building experience, and I fucking loved it. It's weird because it even made me care more about the actual narrative aspects of some of it too. The reflections at the hot springs felt earned and meaningful as my health bar grew and I could take a second to slow down after an intense battle with heaps of powerful Mongols, or reaching a cliff edge and composing a haiku, the one that felt the most fitting, just to give me a breather. Even the fox dens felt like a change of pace to just follow one of these little fellas and get an additional charm slot that was necessary to making Jin stronger against what sometimes felt like unstoppable odds. This game thrives on lethal mode, and if you haven't tried it, I cannot recommend it more. Don't get me wrong, it's tough, sometimes fucking brutal, and I will concede, I'm not sure if the dueling mechanics are consistent enough for it to not sometimes get unbearably frustrating. I died to some of these fuckers 50 plus times before I had a perfect run, and sometimes I did think it was pure luck, but more often than not, it makes the game 100 times better, and after the initial struggle to get to grips with it, you start to play in such a new and creative way that makes every location feel important. I don't think I could ever go back to playing on a regular difficulty, and I will absolutely be playing Yotei like this too, and I cannot wait for that experience, which is crazy because until just recently, I wasn't even that excited to jump into Yotei. It was a game that I knew that I'd play, and I was at least a little interested to see what it was all about, but playing Tsushima on lethal mode made me feel a kind of excitement I haven't felt in quite a long time, and that's pretty powerful. Hopefully, Sony doesn't let me down again. I think maybe the only thing in this regard I'd love to have seen more of is a little more role-playing. Let me just grab a drink in town, or set up camp in the wilderness, or stay the night at an inn. Nothing major, just some things that make it feel as if you're living in the space a little more. I think one of the most memorable parts of Tsushima, regardless of difficulty, is the atmosphere. I was talking to someone the other day on my Patreon community Discord about Assassin's Creed Shadows, not that I make a habit out of doing that, and the only real thing I've seen for the game was the Digital Foundry tech analysis, which I think is very interesting. I love their stuff. And while I have no interest in modern Assassin's Creeds, the tech is really impressive stuff. The game has crazy good fidelity, really well integrated weather mechanics and ray traced lighting and all that shit. Like, it's very cool. But despite that, I wholeheartedly believe Ghost of Tsushima looks better. It's clear the game is less crisp, the textures maybe aren't as good, but the art direction is one of the best to ever do it in the modern AAA space. There is no other game where I can feel quite like I do playing Tsushima. Hopping on your horse, riding along the coast of the island with the leaves falling, the wind blowing in synchronization, the colors popping, the sound of the waves and birds chirping, the trees shimmering, the ambience. It's remarkable. You can look at this game from any angle and it could be a painting, and that's done both by the incredibly intentional art direction and the composition of the environment. The mountains and trees and buildings are placed in such specific ways to create this exaggerated yet authentic representation of the island of Tsushima. The presentation taps into both the real world's beauty and also builds on it to convey the feeling a place can evoke. And that's real artistry, and an approach I will always prefer to realism. You can have the most impressive tech in the world, but if you have no substantial artistic flair, it does nothing for me. Once again, for those who will say, but Shadows does have art direction, it's not pure realism, and even then, pure realism has to have art direction, I'd say, yeah, I agree with you, but let's not pretend Assassin's Creed Shadows inspires the same awe as Ghost of Tsushima. It's a game that can often look pretty, but it can often look bland. Ghost always looks extraordinary, and always evokes a feeling by doing so. It's interesting laying all of this out because I think it's clear Tsushima wants to be heavy on exploration. It wants you to admire the world, to feel a close bond with your horse, or your digital deluxe edition horse that it really wants you to pick. I don't know why it's like this. It's just a normal fucking brown horse. I ain't picking that boring motherfucker over this lovely gamer, which of course I named Sora after my dog, which made the end of Act 2 feel like a genuine trauma. I mean, look, the horse bonding isn't close to Red Dead Redemption 2, but the little animations between quests, him giving you a nudge on the back, one day we'll go for a peaceful ride, I feel a connection there, and it's really effortlessly done, and I think it all ties into how heavy the game is on exploration. You spend so much time wandering around, riding your horse, absorbing Jin's home and how beautiful it is, and that makes its slow destruction all the more compelling as a reason to fight. But despite all that, the game still falters in the ways I described. But Act 1 is the least egregious. In fact, Act 1 is phenomenal, both in its world design, pacing, and exploration structure. It's not until later that things start to slip, which we'll discuss as we get deeper into the game itself, as well as other deeper mechanical aspects. It doesn't end here, I just like to try and pace things gradually. The other interesting facilitation of the open world, though, is actually character growth. How you interact with what you do has a direct impact on Jin's own journey. It happens in major ways, like getting flashbacks and little comments the more you use stealth, but also just generally gameplay has direct correlation back to the character journey. Jin has to grapple between the way he was taught and the way he has learned, and so as the player you do too. The different acts work to alter to what extent you feel guilt or motivation to do so, and while you can totally ignore that context if you choose, I think playing into it makes it more fun. During the first act, I tried to play a little torn, used honorable methods when I could, but delved deeper into stealth with more difficult situations, whereas in Act 2 I pulled back, tried to be more of a samurai, but felt myself with every new ghost ability leaning deeper into that playstyle against my attempts to stop. It felt too necessary, and then by Act 3 I was playing full-on ghost playstyle. I think that mirroring is really powerful in making the player feel part of the narrative, and again, the lethal mode kinda builds onto that, making you feel totally out of your depth. Maybe you could argue it would be a superior experience if the game forced you to play in these ways, but honestly, I think putting that on the player and giving them the ability to just miss that is actually what makes it work. The fact I naturally lent into playing in a way that bolstered Jin's own journey is what makes it. And that's really what this entire chapter is about, laying the foundations for the inner conflict. Across the act, we gather allies, from samurai to ronin, and all of these quests explore people standing in this world and their views on the conflict they are a part of, as well as Jin's own quest to free Shimura. Characters like Masako explore the way emotions can penetrate the samurai code, that care often uncontrollably trumps your duty, but also how that can completely consume you. Ryuzo, Jin's childhood friend, explores the imbalance between people born into power and those who are not. Even before the Mongols, Ryuzo was struggling and had cultivated a disdain for the samurai and a slight resentment for Jin despite their long friendship because of how Jin had everything handed to him on a platter, and despite Ryuzo's hard work, he never made it as a samurai, and Jin never even considered that. The most important thing of all, though, is saving Taka, Yuna's younger brother, and exposing Jin to the idea of the people's faith in something, or someone, keeping them strong, but that the faith they begin to hold is not at all in the samurai, but instead in Jin himself, as people begin to call him the Ghost. Jin appreciates they need this, but tries time and time again to assure people Shimura will return and that he will save them. He believes in his uncle, and we see this constantly. But the people just don't, or in fact choose to place faith in someone who acts in their best interest, who puts their island and their people above the image of sophistication. Everything you do in this act is exposing Jin to a reality he was sheltered from, a reality that I'd imagine keeps a lot of samurai and nobility from understanding the world outside of their perfect bubble, a bubble which is perpetuated by those who rule, like Shimura and the Shogun, because it's beneficial to them. That's not to say Shimura is doing what he's doing for selfish reasons, he's just as indoctrinated, but we'll explore Shimura in a little more detail later. This chapter is in many ways what I talked about Assassin's Creed 2 needing more of. Jin grew up a samurai, the son of a lord and nephew to the Jito, with the best interests of the people of his island at heart, but without understanding their plight, and he never would have had to confront that if the Mongols hadn't shown up. This situation and invasion allows him to not only see the horrors of war and the weakness in tradition, but the way that people really feel about those like him, and it's quite jarring. In Assassin's Creed 2, Ezio is always a good guy with good intent. His father also was, his whole family is, and despite being nobles, he never has to reckon with the inequality, even when working with the thieves or courtesans. It just never gets unpacked, which is bizarre in a game about class inequality and oppression and government corruption. Ghost, though, makes this central to Jin's journey, and I really think it's compelling stuff. He decides before meeting any of these people that the samurai need to change, but it's not until exploring all of these scenarios that he considers the samurai may be wrong in more ways than just one, which makes the culmination of the act and infiltrating Castle Canada all the more intense. To get into the castle, Taka, who is also a skilled blacksmith, crafts the Iron Hook, a grapple hook that allows Jin to scale the walls in specific areas with these ropes or white cloth, as well as swing across gaps too. It's not a deep gameplay mechanic, all it really does is provide extra utility to move around in a way that feels good, but because of that, because it feels good, and because of the increased utility, plus how general level design feels built around using the grapple, it pushes you to use it. Just like how lethal mode makes the game hard and pushes you into stealth and using your tools, the grapple pushes you more into lurking from the roofs or cliffs, swinging across camps and battlements to dispatch targets because it's more efficient and feels better to play. As you infiltrate the castle in what is a decently fun set-piece stealth sequence, every member of your gang has a role to play. Everyone has something they specialize in and something to contribute. Rather than the rigid roles of the samurai, Jin is the leader of a ragtag group of diverse people with a diverse skill set. This, in and of itself, is a subversion of everything he'd been raised for, and that being what ultimately saves Shimura is important because to him, that feels like a perversion. The one person who isn't here, though, is Ryuzo. I think to anyone paying attention, it'd be obvious he turned on us. Entering the courtyard of the castle, or one of them, I don't know, it's kind of like a garden, we find him waiting. The Khan had paid him to kill us, that he'd give him and his straw hats food and supplies. He's doing this for his people, breaking from his loyalty to his friend to help the people he cares for. It works as a pretty competent foil for Jin, who is in many ways doing the same. Ryuzo is a cautionary character. Jin needs to make sure he's doing what he's doing for the right reasons and that he doesn't cross a line, but at the same time, there's a shallowness to Ryuzo. He's essentially a defeated man who acts as a compelling opposite to Jin, but in and of himself feels quite hollow. He's just thrown in with the Mongols and kind of loses any nuance that existed in his own little quest during Act 1. His final words after you fight him being, "This is their home now," is like, I don't know, man, that feels like it kind of came out of nowhere. What exactly did they even do to you? I don't think we quite get enough from him to build out a real sense of depth. As we move forward, we climb the castle tower, using all the skills we've learned thus far, of which we'll discuss in just a moment, to dispatch the Mongols and free Lord Shimura, who has heard of our exploits and is a little reluctant of Jin. Once we leave and get a moment to talk, Shimura makes it very clear what he thinks of Jin's acts, that he's grateful for the rescue, but they cannot go on like this, and that they have to win the war as samurai with honor and respect. Jin isn't convinced, but he also loves his uncle and wants his approval pretty desperately, which puts him in an awkward position, and that's what Act 2 is about. That grapple between duty, legacy, family, and doing what has to be done to help the people of our home. There feels like a very significant shift when Shimura returns. As we ride from the castle, there's this sense of looming superiority, like you feel a little suffocated after all of this freedom in Act 1, and a little guilty too, that we didn't save Shimura in the correct way. But it's not a true guilt, more a manipulated guilt, and it feels ugly and toxic. The way Shimura talks about Yuna too, a character we've come to like, leaves a bad taste in your mouth. He won't even grant her passage to the mainland until they've taken back his castle. He demands she help Jin build an army, and even needs her help to light a lighthouse fire to send a signal to the Mongols that they're coming. He's even more consumed by pride than we'd seen before, and it's incredibly off-putting, especially after a whole chapter immersing ourselves in the ordinary people. We don't have time to be lighting signals to peacock at the Khan for your own vanity. It begins to sow a distrust and a dislike for Shimura. I think this is punctuated by Yuna's sharp words when Jin tells her of what Shimura asked of her.
Typical samurai, squeezing people for everything they're worth.
It cuts like a knife. The difficulty, though, comes from the fact Shimura very clearly cares for Jin, and he's not lying, not pretending. He does love him, and Jin does love him too. Shimura wishes Jin safe travels and sends him on his way, from Act 1's map of Izuhara to Act 2's map of Toyotama, to gather an army, send a message to the Shogun, and to collect his family armor, in the hopes that it would allow him to reconnect with his lineage and his honor. I think splitting the game into acts and the map to be separated by these acts was a really smart move, because not only does it gate story-relevant quests and objectives to make them feel more specific to the current point in the journey, it allows the maps themselves to feel distinct and relevant to the narrative also. Act 1's Izuhara is beautiful, it's free, it's got lots of peace to it, but Toyotama? It's rife with conflict, pain, and war. The beauty is still there, it always is in Ghost, but this area of the map is far, far more conflicted, as is Jin's innermost self, and I love that reflection. I think games need to bring back gating areas of the map until certain parts of the story. Being able to go across the whole map from the very start works in some cases, I mean, Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild do it tremendously, but in narrative-heavy games, I think it's necessary to drip-feed aspects of the world. I think it makes it a far more cohesive experience. Okay, so now we're a decent way in. This is sort of where the game truly begins in a lot of ways. The training wheels are taken off, and you've kind of got access to just about everything you'll need or want access to other than the third and final map. But in a gameplay sense, we are now totally free of any shackles, so it's the perfect time to dive into the game on a mechanical level. So, let's begin. The first pillar of the game is Jin's own samurai background, and that influences the basis of combat. Before any of the actual combat mechanics, we have standoffs. It's very much to this game what the duel mechanic is to Red Dead Redemption, and that makes a lot of sense. In film, westerns and Shambara, being basically samurai films, heavily influenced each other, and so you often see similarities between the two genres, and this game plays on that. It's a very satisfying mechanic when you can chain together your kills, racking up resolve, and then heading into a fight. But it does require heading into a fight. So while it takes out a few guys, feels great, and stocks some resolve, you then will be forced to contend with the combat. And on lethal, that could prove pretty tough depending on what you're tackling, so there's a necessary risk-reward to weigh up. Fighting itself is pretty straightforward with only a couple basic moves. You've got your light attacks and your heavy attacks to break an enemy's defense, and then you've got dodges and parries. Dodges for when an enemy sword glints red, parries for regular attacks, and when the sword glints blue after you've unlocked the corresponding skill that allows you to parry attacks that would otherwise be unparryable. The basis is attacking when you can and using your heavy attacks to break their defense to continue dealing damage. But really, you want to play defensively. I mean, defense is the best offense, right? apparently. In doing so, you utilize those parries, which open up an enemy, but ideally, the perfect parries at just the right time to deal max damage, which on lethal is usually an insta-kill outside of duels. There's also a skill for perfect dodges, which is the same thing but for dodges, which would have been useful for me to have, but I forgot to get it, and so I finished the game without it, and it made the final boss exceedingly tough. Don't do what I did. This stuff is basic, but yet it nails game feel. Something I think games often lack is mechanics and visuals lining up in such a way that you feel great, and Ghost has that in droves. Its style and its substance. Like I said, sometimes the duels feel a little unfair, attacks will track you in ways you couldn't really anticipate, and sometimes dodging feels off, like you hit the button and you just don't quite move out of the way, but other times it works. It's strange, and there's certain attacks I never understood even by the end. I still don't know how some of these were meant to be consistently dodged. I think maybe stronger iframes could have benefited the game in areas. Lethal is sometimes a bit too tight with dodges in a way that feels a little unfair. On top of this, animation overlap with no ability to cancel means you'll do what you think is a safe attack, only to have an enemy attack you mid-animation with no way to avoid it, and no way to know that was going to happen, and on lethal, that can be lethal. If you have to commit to an attack, and an enemy can disrupt that attack, their disruption or their move needs to be telegraphed, but sometimes they'll just sort of appear in an attack animation and there's nothing you can do about it. They're not issues that happen all the time, but they do happen and they can become frustrating. Shimura tells us in the flashback to combat that a samurai fights with patience and discipline, even when the opponent resorts to trickery. But who are we kidding? We ain't no perfect samurai. By studying or killing Mongol leaders around the map, you slowly pick up new stances, ones that Jin was not taught and that are exclusive to the Mongols. I really love this, in part because it encourages stealth, to observe your foes before diving into combat, but also it's more gameplay and narrative synergy. Jin learning how to beat his enemies by watching his enemies, and then putting that into practice. You've got Stone Stance, which is your default samurai stance for sword dudes, Water Stance for shield-bearing enemies, Wind Stance for the guys with spears and axes, and then Moon Stance for the big fuck-off brute men that look like Assassin's Creed Valhalla bosses. I also like how each stance icon matches the corresponding PlayStation controller button, sort of, so it makes it easier to remember which one does which in a pinch. I think that's pretty clever, if it was intentional. Each stance has its own skill tree with its own abilities that all have utility in combat, from things like fast and heavy attacks or combos to chain together defense breaks, and on and on. I did find on lethal a lot of these became somewhat useless, not the stances themselves, but the abilities. You can kill guys so quick that you can circumvent getting a lot of these skills for the stance upgrades, and I think that's a shame. But at the same time, those abilities existed because of how spongy enemies could get on harder difficulties and late into the game. It's a trade-off that I'm not mad about, but it does feel somewhat unbalanced in areas. I think this makes the game dynamic enough that it's kind of one of the more unique combat systems out there, and I think in games of this nature, being vaguely action RPGs, I guess, TM, it's one of the best. On top of that though, you have your ghost tools, of which you unlock more of across the game, and your trusty bow for dispatching a few guys at range. Holy shit. Although it's used more for stealth, at least for me. I'm also realizing as I'm writing this, I just never got the longbow on this playthrough. That's really funny, man. I just totally forgot to bother, which maybe makes it totally useless. Or maybe I would have had less trouble had I got it. Either way, I thought I'd just note that for the hashtag longbow lovers out there. The tools slowly accumulate as you progress at certain points when you've gained enough legend, the means by which you gain technique points, and you'll get a new piece of ghost equipment inspired by the Mongols' tools. There's a mix between combat utilization and stealth utilization, and on lethal, some of these can be a little broken. For example, the black powder bombs could wipe out a few guys in one go, and then the smoke bombs were pretty easy to just spam and chain assassinate. It doesn't make it less fun, but again, it feels like the balancing has left the building a little bit. Although I will say, I never felt like I was trivializing anything. Because the challenge always persisted on lethal, I was just using the mechanics that felt maybe a little broken to even the odds that were stacked against me, so maybe balancing re-entered the chat? I have no idea. You make your mind up and let me know in the comments. We'll also talk about some extensions to combat later. There is more, but just hold your horses. We'll get there. I think combat is supplemented heavily by the progression system that exists in the game, which I won't spend a million years on because talking about skill trees and crafting makes me often want to blow my brains out, but I really enjoyed how progression works in Ghost. The skill tree is simple, but I think it's used to great effect. By the end of the game, you'll likely have everything. You aren't making compromises like with regular RPGs where you have to decide what skill you need most because skill points are finite. In Ghost, the aim is to get everything. It's a bit less of a skill tree and more of a development tree. Path. I don't know. Point being, you essentially grab the next skill that feels the most useful as you make your way through all of them, and getting skills is linked to your legend growing, so as your legend grows, you become more powerful, and I think that slaps. It's once again narrative and gameplay synergy, and this game has that shit in buckets. The other method of progression that I felt was so much more important this time around was with armor, weapons, and charms. Using the shit you find around the world, like 24 times supplies, which is top 5 lootable items in gaming, you can upgrade your gear, and in doing so, it changes the appearance of your armor, which is cool, but most importantly, it upgrades the stats and the abilities tied to your pieces of armor. And so you pick the armor that works for your personal playstyle, and on lethal, that is deeply necessary, as are the charms you decide to use, making sure everything is optimal so you don't die 50 times in 5 minutes. I never really noticed before how vast an array of options you have in this game, and it's such fun to play around with it all. On top of that, finally getting the necessary items to upgrade your katana is unbelievably satisfying. You can finally do more damage on a difficulty that desperately requires you to be on top form. Once again, lethal makes every upgrade necessary and rewarding, rather than just another chore to complete because you have to complete it. Stealth is introduced at the very start, but like I said, as the game progresses and your legend grows, the more it develops on itself. Stealth in this game is kind of tremendous. I'd forgotten before revisiting just how stylish and expressive this game was. Stalking enemies through a camp, swinging above their heads using a conjunction of your bow, poison darts, chimes, and chain assassinations. You can pull off some really fantastic shit. The tools you have let you be deeply creative, especially with skill upgrades and chimes, and I think Ghost is one of the most compelling stealth games there is, and not because it's hard, because it's not. This is not Metal Gear or Splinter Cell, it's primarily an action experience, but one that creates a power fantasy. The levels themselves, whether a set piece or a camp, are designed meticulously to encourage aggressive stealth. It's one of the things I think Assassin's Creed really lacked in its RPG era that might still be going on. I don't really know what Shadows is, but the level design of bandit camps from Origins to Valhalla was kind of just there. They never tried to build them specifically around stealth in any way that felt truly engaging. Valhalla kind of did, I guess, but with such buggy AI and a detection system that was basically instant and no ability to re-enter stealth, it was worthless. Ghost, though, has level design that just oozes player agency, from the position of its buildings, its cliffs, the grapple points, enemy placement, tall grass, the way you can slip in and out of buildings and between fences. You feel like a Predator, and not the Ubisoft kind. I will say, though, missions themselves that use stealth often feel far less free than the regular stealth encounters within the open world. A lot of it is on rails and doesn't offer a ton of player choice. You kind of just follow a set path, and that is often kind of lame. On top of that, I do wish Shimura would notice when you did bad ghost things in combat, whether stealth or tools or whatever else, but he doesn't really care outside of cutscenes, and while it's not the end of the world, I kinda wish, with all the gameplay and narrative synchronization the game has going on, that this occurred too. I think there is a criticism to be made that the stealth isn't that deep. You essentially pick off really dumb AI as you move around, and yeah, like, that is true. I think maybe adopting some of the things The Last of Us Part 2 did would benefit all aggressive stealth games that aren't trying to be deep stealth sims, and I do hope Yotei has a little more going for it where stealth is concerned, but I think the fun carries, and you do have to think, you do have to plan, especially in larger spaces, and the thing with Ghost is that it's versatile. You don't have to be unseen all the time, you just have to be a perfect killer. So you can start in stealth, and hey, if you get caught, cut down everyone without breaking a sweat, and the fantasy remains intact. And I think a lot of stealth games miss that. You often feel like you should reload if you get caught, but I never feel that in Ghost, and I think that goes a really long way. Final pillar is traversal, and we've discussed horsing around, which is barely a mechanic anyway. I want to use this section to discuss verticality. Climbing, climbing. Climbing in this game sucks. Like, it's serviceable, it does the job, but it's pretty garbage as a mechanic. You just hold up and sometimes use the grapple, and then hold up again. The most fun is when you're jumping across gaps, using the grapple to swing or hang on these branch things, and even that is shallow as shallow comes. I think this is the area the game utterly fails to deliver on much of anything at all. Valhalla has a more compelling climbing system than Ghost of Tsushima, and that game's climbing is a crime. And for the most part, the game doesn't really try to use climbing. It's just sort of tacked on. Sometimes you climb up a cliff. The only area where climbing is a core mechanic is with shrines, and that's when you start to feel how nothing it is as a system. These are not complex, they are barely engaging. It's just such a nothing system that without the shrines, I'm not sure I'd really notice it's even in the game. But because the shrines exist, you start to see how flimsy it is, and it's a shame because having complex and engaging verticality could have been a win for a game like this. I will say I really do like the roll ability, the way Jin has to learn to adapt to a new way of moving around, and even comments on how it's a thief's technique, although I don't know why protecting yourself from fall damage would be against the samurai code. I guess because they don't do a whole lot of jumping around, maybe they're so rigid they just face the fate of falling from a height. I don't know, man. I just like the mechanic. I wanted to use this segment, though, to actually discuss the Assassin's Creed-shaped elephant in the room. People called Ghost the best Assassin's Creed in years. And I think that's stupid. I've always thought that's stupid, because I think it's predicated more on what the RPG games should have been, rather than what Assassin's Creed actually is. If Ubisoft released a new Assassin's Creed that played exactly like Ghost, absent the fact that it would be derivative, it would still be lacking fundamentals that act to construct the franchise's important and core identity, which Ubisoft has violently beaten, discarded, and proceeded to laugh at just for existing. Similar to their treatment of female employees. Another game also had this said about it back in 2014, Shadow of Mordor, and I think you can start to understand why. To the mainstream, Assassin's Creed was a game series where you do sword fights, stealth kill guys, and climb sometimes, and so if you boil it down to those three elements, both Shadow of Mordor and Ghost of Tsushima are great Assassin's Creed games. Unfortunately, that's actually not what Assassin's Creed's identity is comprised of, or at least the identity that longtime fans consider important. It would be like saying GTA 5 is the best Saints Row we've had in years. While yes, both games have you exploring an open-world city, killing things, and sometimes stealing vehicles, both games are vastly different in their core identity, and that's the exact crux of the problem for trying to suggest Ghost of Tsushima is anything close to what Assassin's Creed is aiming for, or should be aiming for. I don't want to harp on about this. This is not an Assassin's Creed video, and I also do not fucking care anymore. However, I've always found this to be a point that is predicated on a misunderstanding of Assassin's Creed, and also kind of reductive to what Ghost is actually doing. Major components of Assassin's Creed's identity are things like being stylish and flashy, as well as a direct confrontation of the oppression people face by ruling powers, and an interesting historical setting. And Ghost does do those. However, other major components include things like social stealth, meaningful and complex parkour, and interesting urban environments, all of which Ghost does not have. It contains elements, and hey, maybe it does sate some of the same itches that old-school Assassin's Creed fans might crave, same as Shadow of Mordor did. But it's still incredibly far from being an ideal Assassin's Creed game. To me, a longtime victim of Assassin's Creed. Now, moving on from that, please do not read the title of this chapter, it will make sense later. Act 2 is where the cracks in the game's open world formula begin to show. Act 1 felt well paced, but also well structured. The missions you were doing were placed quite nicely in areas that took you through uncharted territory, yet also weren't a huge distance from each other, and so, in doing so, coupled with just being let out into this open space, it pushed the player to deviate and find things, and you do that regularly on your way to pick up the next main quest. The thing with Act 2 is that it's simply more of the same things you've already done. You unlock this brand new map which is bigger than the first, only to be met with this sinking feeling of, oh boy, here we go again. Coupled with brand new side quest chains from a host of other characters, as well as the ones from Act 1 still continuing. You also now have duels and farmsteads, which are added to the previous map, and so instead of the world being this peaceful place you very casually feel out as you naturally move around, it very, very quickly becomes a whole fuck ton of markers that you feel you need to visit, as well as returning to the old map to check off new markers too, in case the overwhelming host of new stuff somehow wasn't enough things vying for your attention. And on top of that, the main mission markers are just so far apart. The first thing that makes sense to do in Act 2 is getting the Sakai armor, because that's what your uncle said to do, and it just feels right as the start to the chapter. But the closest thing to you is to just head to Yarikawa, and if you get caught up in that questline, then you kinda embrace the ghost before ever grabbing the Sakai armor, and that feels a little incongruent. So if you want to grab the armor first, you're riding 2 kilometers across the map to pick it up. And sure, you could grab side stuff at the same time, but the balancing is skewed. In Act 1, you naturally move around a smaller area and you do a few side things before reaching your next main quest. It feels tidy and it feels careful. In Act 2, you are riding such a long distance to the main quest marker, it feels bizarrely cumbersome. This might sound like a complete non-issue to some of you. I'm sure you're thinking, just ride straight there or linger and do the side stuff, don't be in such a rush. And that's fine, if that works for you, then that's cool, play that way. I mean, it wasn't game destroying for me either, but I think it's valid to criticize how they place missions in a world and how that influences how you explore to feel less organic and natural than it did in Act 1. It really doesn't help, too, that the side stuff here is all the same stuff. It's always going to be bandit camps, hot springs, bamboo strikes, haikus, lighthouses, shrines, pillars of honor, but more often than not, probably another godforsaken fox den. Whoever thought of adding this many fox dens needs the sternest of talking tos about their future in the games industry. And it fills you with such a disappointment because they're also the most annoying open world task types to perform, because they can just be a little tedious. And for those saying that it's not a big problem, it's not that long, then I dare you not to skip the video now. We're gonna do this fox den together. Bearing in mind I wouldn't be in your head doing this. You'd just be doing it. Yeah. He has to sort of figure out which way he wants to go. Like, the way he's programmed is in, like, a zigzag line, is what I've noticed. Like, he doesn't, like, he's not, like, free form, like, organically walking. It's like he's literally, like, straight lines that have been drawn by the devs, which is fine. It's just, there's so many of them that I've noticed it, which is a little immersion breaking. Oh, here we go. I mean, it's a nice view. Fantastic! And the side stuff, being made up of all the same things, kind of takes the wonder and awe out of moving around. It's a similar thing to what I felt playing Breath of the Wild for the first time, in that the only things that you can really do are shrines, and once you realize that, you start to disconnect a bit from the actual discovery of the world, and I think the same thing happens here to Ghost. It no longer feels like a careful and balanced, unique open world experience. It feels like a bloated one that uses wind instead of a map. All the criticisms I had of the world during Act 1 become actual problems in Act 2, and it starts to feel incredibly exhausting. In many ways, this feels no different from a modern Assassin's Creed. Stuff to do, and lots of it. Better get to work, kid, mop up the map, take that shit off a list. It kills the vibe that Act 1 had in droves. I think the game here also suffers from similar issues to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which you'd already know my feelings on if I'd released that damn fucking video. One day I will. But that game is essentially split into two halves. No spoilers, by the way. And the first half is wonderfully curated and paced, and one of the greatest RPGs I've ever played. The second half, though, it's very good. But it deeply struggles to match the first half in its pacing and structure, but also in its exploration and discovery. And part of that comes from the game's story almost restarting, finding its footing again. You've completed the main quest, now what do we do? Here's another main quest. Ghost has this too. You've saved Shimura, now we have to reacclimate to a new plan to take back another castle, starting from square one again in a lot of ways, which can feel kind of stunted. But the other way KCD2 struggles is in the difficulty. You never feel like you need more gear in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 second half, because by the end of the first half, you are already OP as hell. Ghost, however, doesn't struggle from the same issue when playing on Lethal, which is its saving grace. Despite feeling overwhelmed and exhausted at points, the bamboo strikes, the loot, the hot springs, they still meant something because I needed that stuff. The enemies are harder, you need to gather more upgrades, and that gives the exploration utility in a way Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 lacked. The issue is that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 manages to retain a feeling of curiosity that Ghost lacks here. Once Act 1 ended, I never again felt the pull or allure of, I wonder what's just over there, and that's a damn shame. None of this is helped by how poor most of the side quests actually are. I mentioned at the top of the video, somewhere, that The Witcher 3, despite having kinda poor exploration and discovery, is carried by the substance of what you do, most of which are going to be quests. Every side story in The Witcher 3 ranges from fun and good to outright tremendous and on par with the main story. I think the best Ghost ever gets with its side quests outside of Icky Island is fine. The very best side quests are the ones that don't overstay their welcome and tie back around to one of the game's central themes, but they all follow a pretty similar formula of beginning a quest, being told one thing, doing the quest, figuring out as the player that the quest giver wasn't being honest, then waiting for Jin to catch the fuck up, and then confronting the lying quest giver. One quest that sticks out as a great example of both of these things is one where you meet a fake samurai who's living on this little farm. Jin has to work out he's a fake samurai, despite us knowing from the get-go that he's obviously fake, and then you confront him, tell him to leave, and the people of the farm say, oh yeah, we knew he was fake. But the moral here is that it gave them hope, so was it really that bad? Sure, it breaks from tradition for someone to be impersonating a samurai, but if it helped these people, should we care? Was Jin right to ward him off? And that's cool. It's not a deep quest, nor do you do anything that fun, but the themes are solid. I don't think that's good, and there are some that are downright boring, and this is really what drags the game down dramatically, because I think what you're left with by Act 2 is a world of things you already know because you've done them a bunch, and side quests that are shallow and at best offer a vaguely competent link to the game's main themes. The world, its exploration and discovery, and the things you're doing all fall apart and become utility above anything else, and it's a stark contrast to Act 1. The game's base gameplay remains strong and fun, and that does a lot of carrying, but there's a severe lack of anything else. There is a remedy to this, but we'll discuss that when talking about Icky Island, which will be part of this video. Usually, I do DLC as the Patreon companion video, but that's because often the DLC feels very separate in ways that make sense to be another video. With Icky, it's both integral narratively, but also to the critiques I'm making. I can't talk about Ghost without talking about Icky, so I'm probably going to have to find another video to be the Patreon companion piece this time, possibly Legends mode. The only other thing worth discussing here now with regards to the world and its downfall are the character tales. The character tales are the big side quest lines for the major characters. Usually they have themes that tie into the main narrative, things like betrayal, loyalty, loss, all that. But holy shit, are they boring. You do a pretty generic task, get one slice of the story, Jin nods along, maybe a little back and forth and dialogue that stokes some interesting fires, and then it's done. Time to head to the next marker and do it again. It's kind of like a Persona hangout session. Here's part 1 of my drama, come back later for part 2. And they drag these out across 3 acts. Why? Who thought this pacing worked? Yuna's tale is great because it's contained, it feels urgent and relevant, and it's only 4 quests long. But Masako? Ishikawa? They just suck massive balls. By Act 2, it's even worse, because it's not just the core characters anymore. Suddenly you've got random fucks like Norio chewing up time, and it just goes on and on and on. I feel like a lot of these could have been done in 3 or 4 quests max, but some of them are fucking 9. Who wants to follow Norio around for 9 goddamn quests where you do similar tasks and get honey-dicked with brief character writing? Take Masako's tale, for example. It's 9 whole parts of chasing down different suspects related to her family's murder, and every single time it's another red herring and another moment for Masako to show she's very, very angry until you finally get to the obvious culprit, and the climax is a whole lot of fucking nothing. Ishikawa is the same deal, endlessly chasing Tomoe like she's some Saturday morning cartoon villain who always slips away at the last second just for the conclusion to be Ishikawa was totally wrong about her motives somehow and the whole thing was a misunderstanding. It's not cathartic after 9 quests of bullshit. It's why Yuna's is genuinely compelling, because the story is told in a way that feels concise and to the point. You wrap it up and feel like you took something away. There's no lingering obvious mystery that's the crux, it's just compelling character work. The rest just kind of drag and try to string you along with a vague mystery and you forget what the goddamn point was. I'll be honest, I didn't even bother doing all of them again this time around, partly because I respect myself and also because I've done them once before. I remember the beats. I don't need to sit through that slog again just to say the same thing in this critique that I said in 2020. I get what they were going for. Long-form arcs that show how Jin's allies are struggling with their own demons alongside his. But man, it's just too stretched out. Instead of building tension or stakes and giving us a larger perspective of the characters, it just makes you groan when another Part 7 of 9 marker pops up on your map and the missions give you crumbs of character depth that ultimately turns them into a caricature rather than an interesting 3-dimensional person. People might be mad at me for this criticism. Maybe you just want to do content in a pretty world with engaging gameplay. Maybe for lots of people that's enough, and that's fine. But I think they also could have written interesting quests. They could have structured the world in a way that felt less cumbersome by Act 2. They could have made things more varied. They could have avoided bloating the game after Act 2 and turning it into a checklist world. And I say all of this because Act 1 is so strong, and because so is the DLC. They just misstepped with the main game post-Act 1 in terms of world. Where they didn't, though, is in narrative. Act 2 is the reflective act, the point where Jin is properly torn between 2 worlds. In Act 1, he was still straddling the line, samurai code on one side, pragmatism and desperation on the other. But in Toyotama, the cracks split into ravines, and Jin's own conflict becomes ever deeper when Shimura announces he's asking the Shogun to formally allow him to adopt Jin as his son. Like I said, grabbing the Sakai armor first is the move to me that makes perfect sense, especially with the family crisis going on here. Jin is trying so hard here to reconnect with his heritage, with his family legacy. Getting the Sakai armor is one of the smartest uses of clothing as symbolism I've seen in a game. Regaining this armor, Shimura believes will make Jin the samurai he wants him to be. But it doesn't really do that, because Jin's father is not the same man that Shimura is. In Act 1, Jin is living for his uncle, trying his best to remain the man he needs him to be, while doing what is necessary to free him. Here, that becomes living for his father and for Clan Sakai, someone who, despite still being a samurai, often bent the rules more than someone like Shimura, as we learn from Yuriko.
I wonder what your father would make of the ghost.
He would disapprove, like my uncle.
Don't be so sure. They argued often. Kazumasa thought your uncle too rigid, willfully blind to possibilities. Kazumasa had imagination.
Imagination? My father?
You're like him in more ways than you know.
And later, Jin begins living for himself, stepping out of both of their shadows. It's so clean thematically that it actually creates a weird problem, because the Sakai armor feels so essential to Jin's growth that it basically kills any real sense of customization. Yeah, you can technically wear whatever you want, but if you're not in the Sakai armor for the big beats during Act 2, it feels like you're missing the point, which means narrative intent and mechanical depth kind of get confused for the first time in the game. The themes of self-reflection are also built upon by the Yuriko tales that you explore while in Omi, the home of Clan Sakai. Yuriko was the family's housekeeper or caretaker, and we learn here she had a close relationship with Jin's father, Kazumasa, and by close relationship, I mean they fucked. This shit is incredibly emotional though, and easily the best set of tales in the game. Yuriko's age is deteriorating her mental state, likely from dementia, and she starts to get her wires crossed and believes Jin is his father, both allowing her to wear her heart on her sleeve, but also for Jin to have a mirror held up, a mirror that shows him both the similarities and differences between him and Kazumasa, and allows Jin to begin to understand that finding his own path might be necessary, against Shimura's wishes. The second Yuriko mission hits this in such a poetic way. Jin speaks to Shimura's stalwart and often stubborn way of being that sometimes in battle you need someone who plants their feet to show strength, to which she responds,
But look at that waterfall. All that immovable rock yields to water. The strength we need is all around us.
Yuriko speaks to how water flows. It takes the shape of whatever it needs to, and eventually it erodes away even the strongest rocks. Jin needs to be the water, and tradition must give way to him. But beyond that, a faith in the world, in its people. Their strength is all around us too. Act 2 spends a lot of time on this idea. Jin inspires Yarikawa, he inspires Yuna, he inspires everyone he touches to fight for what matters in a way that the samurai never did. The samurai lord in him doesn't get respect here, but the man who protects them does. The ghost does. And this all comes to a head in the quest The Ghost of Yarikawa. This is a moment he evolves from a man torn and confused and uncertain to one who knows what he needs to be. He sees the morale of the men slipping, he sees the faith they put in his cause, despite trying to push back and bolster the samurai and Shimura. But in this moment, he slaughters the Mongol leader and sends the rest of the army packing from sheer fear. The ghost has become a symbol, and Jin has finally embraced that symbol, and with that has become a powerful force to drive the Mongols away and bring the people of Yarikawa together. The Ghost Dance 2 is a tremendous example once again of the game crafting narrative and gameplay synergy to make the player feel part of events. You can now use the ability whenever you want by slaughtering a Mongol leader or by killing enough people without taking a hit. The more efficient you are, the more of a ghost you are. The more you instill fear in the enemy, using their own tools against them. The people of Yarikawa are behind Jin, behind the ghost, but there is always a cost for inspiration like this. Taka's death is the moment that reality hits. There will be losses, and there's similarities to be drawn here between the ghost's cause and the samurai, people willing to lay down their lives for what they believe in. In war, there will be casualties, but they cannot be senseless, they cannot be without meaning, and that's where Jin draws his line. Shimura is okay sending his men to their deaths despite there being more pragmatic options because he has to play by the rules, he has to fight with honor no matter the cost. But Jin will not let his allies die for something so vain. Taka's death was a tragedy, and it was a learning experience that carries us into the final quest of Act 2, the assault to take back Shimura Castle. During this sequence, Jin once again embraces the ghost, and I think here there is a level of critique leveled at Jin's actions. Shimura, of course, opposes these actions, with Jin trying to explain that it's all they know, but the way the camera pans showing the Mongols choking on their own blood, to me implies that maybe this was a little too far. I'm not really sure, because the game never truly confronts quite how gruesome Jin's methods are in a way that feels like it condemns them. It always acknowledges that it's difficult, but that it has to be done, so I'm a little on the fence about what this specific moment is meant to signify. Was Shimura right? Is Jin right? Perhaps it's supposed to be a bit of both, but nothing is greatly done with that, which could be a waste of nuance that might have been interesting to explore a little more. Jin is ultimately right though. By the time they reach the bridge, the Mongols have set up a trap. They destroy the bridge, sending over a dozen samurai soldiers to their death. These deaths were senseless, in the name of preserving honor. I think this moment is in direct opposition to the moment I just discussed. We're taken aback by how gruesome Jin's methods are, but Shimura's clean methods mean all these young men die at the hands of the invaders of the island. Which is worse? I guess that's up to you. Jin has had enough. He finally snaps at Shimura. There is another way, and he'll be damned if he's going to stand by while these men continue to die for Shimura's vanity. And that's where we get one of the most important lines of the game, and a major turning point for Jin as a character.
You sent our men to die.
They are soldiers.
Their blood is on our hands. I can find a way past the bridge. Poison the enemy.
An act of terror.
I am trying to save our people.
By teaching them to fear us. If you continue down this path, you will be no better than the Mongols. I trained you to fight with honor.
Honor died on the beach. The Khan deserves to suffer.
You are ruled by your emotion.
I sacrificed everything I knew to save our people. I gave them hope. You did nothing! No. We're finished.
It forces Jin to finally accept what he already knew. Honor died on the beach. The Ghost is not just a tool to fight these Mongols anymore, it's who he is. Jin Sakai and the Ghost are now synonymous, and those ideals and convictions are what carry us into Act 3. I will say though, Jin saying the Khan deserves to die is another aspect that never gets unpacked. I understand Jin doing what has to be done for the greater good, but suggesting the Khan deserves to suffer is a bit more malice than we've seen up to this point. I don't necessarily disagree that the Khan deserves it, but Jin stating it so emotionally is a beat we don't ever get to directly confront, which is yet again just another facet of Jin's transformation that could have been a point of critique or inner conflict, but is just brushed aside and never mentioned again. Once again, armor signifies character depth, as Yuna presents Jin with a set that Taka was working on, the Ghost armor. Taka's memory, his legacy, lives on through Jin. He casts away his father's armor, the armor of his family name, and embraces what the people need of him. This is the conclusion of his rebirth. The water has finally eroded the cliff. This is sort of bolstered by the fact that we kill Ryuzo here, a childhood friend of Jin's. It's like a declaration that his past is no more, that he's let it all go, that there is no longer room for sentiment here. Almost as if the Ghost is in direct opposition to who Jin Sakai was. Of course though, the Khan isn't here, he's a regular old Princess Peach, but also does kind of paint him as this big coward, which at this point reduces his terror. The Ghost is beginning to scare him. Everything that's been bubbling comes to a head here. Shimura sees what Jin did, all the Mongols lying dead in their own blood from the poison. He can't seem to understand why it was necessary. He's a lost cause. He tries to appeal to Jin here, to get him to blame Yuna, to relinquish the Ghost, to embrace being Jin Shimura. But he doesn't.
I am not your son. I am the Ghost.
This isn't just him accepting himself as a symbol. I think this is him accepting who he has always been at his core. This is the moment he begins to live for himself, with his own code that benefits all people. Never again will he live in a castle. Never again will he wear finery and eat the best food. He won't live in comfort, or perhaps even be remembered. But he casts all of this aside so that there's just a modicum of chance that the people of Tsushima are saved. And this is punctuated by his escape. After being imprisoned to stop a civil war breaking out, given a lot of these men followed Shimura for him, Kenji, who I've not mentioned one time in this video, but you know Kenji.
Kenji, James. Kenji from Ghost of Tsushima.
Helps us escape, tells us where Yuna is waiting, and so under the cover of darkness, the Ghost slips out. But he's spotted. Jin escapes just by the skin of his teeth, but a price is paid for that escape. Another loss. Sora. This is why I believe the white horse called Sora is the best possible choice for your first horse, and why the second horse needs to be the black one called Kage, because it fits the arc so wonderfully. Jin has to lose Sora to become the Ghost. He cannot hold on to anything from his old life, and that is painful. As the player, we might not be able to emotionally relate to Jin's relationship to Shimura. I think most of us probably understand why Jin does what he does, and we're gunning for that. It's easy to understand his relationship to Shimura and why it would hurt to have to leave him behind, but I don't think the game can truly manage to convey the actual empathy we need to make it count. This is the right move, and I cannot really force myself to pretend I give much of a shit about Shimura as a guy. But you kill our horse, the symbol of Jin's old life, this white symbol of purity with the name Sky, and suddenly it works perfectly. Because I shed fucking tears. Like I said before, the bond isn't as deep as Red Dead Redemption 2, but those scenes after quests, the fact you spend so much time riding, the little words Jin says to the horse, you built a connection you didn't know was there, and seeing it limp, push on as much as it can only to fall, it's fucking heartbreaking. This is the emotional gut punch the player needs to reflect how Jin feels running from the only life he'd ever known just to do what's right. And Kage, meaning shadow, is him embracing what comes next. It's frankly beautiful. And so ends Act 2.
I'm sorry I couldn't protect you.
Act 3 is maybe Ghost at its absolute least cohesive. Kamiagata is the third map, and it's a wonderful backdrop to the story. It's barren, it's cold, it's pretty lonely, and its activities are sparse. I think thematically that works, right? It's a reflection of where Jin is at, and the act is kinda about him coming to terms with this, and being content with his choices. But on a gameplay front, it is totally incongruent with the actual story. Once you're here, it makes such little sense to be roaming around doing side quests and activities. We have to stop the Khan because they're going to use the poison that they learned from Jin to wipe out the mainland of Japan. More on that later. So there's a real sense of urgency that makes roaming around feel stupid. This area of the map is far more geared towards the end game than the actual act that it's a part of. And also, by the time you're in Act 3, you don't want to be doing this shit, man. I don't want to go do more bandit camps or follow more fucking foxes. Stop beckoning me, you little fucker. If you're actually doing all of this stuff, if your brain requires you to clear a map, then you are fucked. Like, seriously, this is going to be a heinous experience for you, unless you're a specific type of psychotic that enjoys collecting 80 Sashimono banners. You fucking weirdo. Thankfully, I can take it or leave it, and I focused on the main story because that's what felt the most correct, but it's hard not to criticize the design here. It's messy and it's bloated. I did, however, finish up Masako and Ishikawa's tales because, I don't know, sunk cost fallacy, I guess, and that feels so weird to do at this point. Again, if you're gonna do it, it feels like after the main story makes the most sense here, because one of them even takes you back to the previous map. I don't care about Tomoe. She isn't anyone. She doesn't matter to me. Why are you making me do this? The bandit camps in this act are so fucking big too. Like, these take some serious time to complete, and even with the strong gameplay, this shit begins to waver, especially when one of the objectives is to kill every Mongol in the camp. Could you maybe just, like, destroy supplies, or, like, kill the leader or captains to send them all running or something? That way, you beat the camp without having to dispatch every single last one. I don't think this design is helpful for giving the player an enjoyable experience, nor does the tedium of clearing out the camp convey anything emotionally resonant. The one thing I did forget to discuss, or, well, I purposely left it until now, were the Mythic Tales, and so, since we're at the end, let's talk about them. Mythic Tales are quests that revolve around mythical tales told by Yamato the musician. Although the actual stories in the game are entirely fictional, they are inspired by Japanese folklore, and that makes each of them unique and interesting, and they become possibly the best in the game, both narratively and mechanically. The reason being, the context presents a mystery, one steeped in fantasy, and the quest itself is an exploration of the truth to that story, how legend warps reality, which is a pretty good mirror to Jin's own journey as the ghost, becoming a legend himself, which would kind of be a great way to immortalize him in Yotei as a legend and story, the Ghost of Tsushima, etc. But these are interesting mechanically because they give you unique abilities, gear, or weapons. The most interesting are the mythic abilities, special moves that consume resolve and do really cool shit, like Heavenly Strike or Darts of Wrath, that allows Jin to further embody the ghost, picking up skills used by legends throughout the world to attain a mythic status too. It allows you to string together these powerful moves as part of your combat, with Heavenly Strike dealing more damage to staggered enemies, or Darts of Wrath dealing 3 unblockable high damage attacks that also have an opportunity to scare the remaining foes away. Also, you can grab things like the Way of the Flame to set your sword on fire, which is pretty rad, as well as unique armors, or the longbow, which, again, I simply did not get. Very sorry to #longbow lovers. This clip of me doing the Darts of Wrath move was supposed to be in the video, but it has crashed my render 7 times over the past couple of the days, and is the reason the video didn't come out over the weekend. I'm not letting it beat me, you're watching it, okay? Even if it has to be like this, I'm not letting it beat me. What do you think? Fucking awesome, right? I think these are integrated nicely and give you a sense of drama and theatrics without needing to lean into literal fantasy to do it. Part of what makes them so interesting is the fact they aren't fantasy. I like learning the truth behind them. I think that makes them mean more as part of the story. If these were explained away as magic and or mythical beasts that exist for some reason, that would be lame. One of the core aspects of obtaining these, though, are through the duels, and Ghost has a lot of duels, all of which are unique and essentially work as one-on-one boss fights. I do find it strange that even by Act 3, when entering a duel, you can't use tools. I feel like the idea that Honor died on the beach, yet still fighting with Honor in these specific scenarios is bizarre. I get that they did it for balancing reasons, to keep the fights engaging and challenging, but it doesn't really make much sense from a story perspective after I just slaughtered a leader, killed 12 people with a combination of poison, bombs, and smoke bomb assassinations, and now I'm facing you head-on-head in a one-on-one battle for some reason. These are good, though, despite dying a lot on so many of them, and like I said, the issues with some of the attacks being tough to predictably avoid, which I do genuinely believe is simply bullshit, which is an issue. They are, by and large, fair and fun and satisfying to overcome, and I can only hope Yotei does something similar, even though Atsu is not a samurai. But then again, if it doesn't fit, I'm okay with them omitting it. Unless you find a way to include tools as part of the duel in some way and still keep it balanced. We'll find out soon enough anyway. I gotta stop mentioning Yotei, to be honest. Discussing my thoughts on what Ragnarok might do dated my God of War video, and I'm doing the same with Yotei here. It's probably gonna date this video, but honestly, who cares? Do you? I don't know, maybe I'm making a thing out of nothing. I think that's it for the mechanics. The third act doesn't add much, it doesn't improve on anything, and it is pretty incohesive other than in its tone. It's very much a short and story-heavy chapter to wrap up the narrative if you avoid doing all of the side stuff. So I suppose we should do the same. Walking along the scorched roads of Kamiyagata leads us to Kin Sanctuary, burned by the Mongols, the sacred tree at its center desecrated. But more than that, we learn how the people of this town died, why they died. The Mongols were testing a poison, the same poison Jin had been using on them. This is such a great way to flip things on its head. Jin has spent the entire game learning from the Mongols, adopting their methods, only for them to eventually adopt his. It's both a means to show how scared they are of him now, but also how becoming the Ghost didn't only do good. He inspired them to think outside the box too, and these people may have died regardless, but the way they died was because of Jin, and this is something he grapples with. It speaks to the way, again, like with Taka's death, there is always sacrifice for change and fighting back, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't fight back, as long as you don't stop. Yuna tries to say that he saved people, that countless more would have died if he hadn't done what he did, but Jin laments that if they don't stop the Khan, then the mainland will suffer the same fate, and that's a good driving force for this act, which is just another reason why the open world doesn't really work as well. We are against the clock, and it's time to lock the fuck in. The Ghost armor isn't something I've touched much upon, and it makes sense to only wear this moving forward in my opinion. We've become the Ghost, it's like a uniform. I really like the fully upgraded version, especially in black. The cape, the mask, the armor, it's such a wonderful design, and I love how rugged it looks. It really helps to sell the idea of him working for the regular people with his outfit being a little rough around the edges. It feels honest. This act really is pretty quick if you just focus on the main story. The core here is gathering forces to assault where the Khan is holding out at Port Izumi, and Yuna knows some nearby bandits. Once they're rallied, and once you have an idea of how to attack the port, the final step is to contact Lord Shimura for extra support. I think this tale is particularly strong, partly because of the gameplay angle. Breaking into a castle without being seen to leave a note is peak stealth gamer and shows how far Jin has come, but also because it would have been so easy to just have Jin break away from his family, from his uncle, and then not directly address it again. It could have easily been the end of an arc, as Jin now focuses on the Khan, but instead they bring it back around. Jin knows Shimura's army would help, he knows how useful his uncle is as a general. I do, however, think this conflicts with what we actually see in the game. Shimura loses all of his men at Commodore, and then also sends his men to their death at the castle, rather than sieging, for seemingly no reason at all. Jin thinks Shimura is wrong so badly he was willing to run away. I suppose maybe Jin just values his uncle as a fighter and could use the extra men, and it's just as simple as that. But then maybe he's fallen victim to the same issues as his uncle. He needs the cannon fodder? I don't know if that's what they were going for here, and I think it removes an angle of respect for his uncle lingering that gives the moment depth. The issue is that we've only been told how capable Shimura is, we've not actually seen it. We've only seen him be kind of a complete fucking idiot. I think we needed at least a couple examples of Shimura doing something that was, like, successful. But we didn't see any of that. I think the true purpose is for Shimura to put aside his disagreements with Jin in favor of doing what's right for the people of Tsushima, and from that angle it totally works. It shows that Shimura loves his island and genuinely did believe he was doing the right thing, even though we can see he was not. Shimura is a victim of order and discipline more than he's a genuinely bad person. The assault on the port is a wonderful set piece, combining both action and stealth and the aid of your allies to make it feel like you're part of this battle. But better yet, it's a direct opposite to the opening. The Battle of Commodore is chaos, it's messy, it's a full-on slaughter. However, this time, you and your allies are careful, methodical, and prepared. It also reflects on the player mechanically too. During the opening, you are incredibly out of your depth, whereas now, you've got a handle on the game to the point that you're kind of unstoppable, and you feel that with every swing of your katana. Jin has control of this battle, and control of himself. Heading into the strangely fight arena-shaped icy pond, we confront Kutan Khan. Now, something I've not really addressed in this video are the Mongols as a set of people, and Kutan Khan as a character. And the reason for that is basically because they are not that in this game, and I remain torn on him as an antagonist for that reason. I understand why they did it, for multiple reasons. Jin's true nuanced battle was with Shimura and the samurai. The real conflict of this game was always the inner conflict and the battle of ideals, which is why Kutan is not the final fight of the game. The Mongols work as a motivator, as a catalyst, as a means to instigate events and get the ball rolling. And because of that, they are not at all complex, and it's difficult to discuss them outside of the context of the game because the historical accuracy of the game is muddy at best and completely inaccurate at worst. The game never claimed to be a history game, but what it's drawing from is far more depictions of Japan from film than real history, and that goes for Tsushima, the samurai and their honor code, as well as the Mongols. According to research, the katana also wasn't even around in this period either. Neither was the samurai honor code, and in real history, the samurai employed a lot more methods than this game would lead you to believe. Ghost is far more an amalgamation of pop culture Japan things than it is a reflection of the real period, which is a little disappointing, I guess. With regards to the Mongols, I think it's hard to give us a nuanced look at them from a Japanese perspective because historically the Mongols were some of the most fierce and systematic in their violence in all of history. There's a reason why Genghis Khan is remembered as one of the most fearsome leaders there ever was. I mean, I'd probably call him an evil warlord tyrant, but I don't know if that's the nuanced sentiment that historians hold. The Mongol Empire was aggressive and pushed for ever-continuous expansion, and they slaughtered so many people in the process that it's almost unfathomable. I think that with a force like that, one that's history is so defined by bloodshed and invasion, it'd be bizarre in this game to have them be represented as anything but that force. To tackle the nuances of the Mongolian Empire would take a story focused on the Mongols themselves, and even then, I'm not sure what you'd explore beyond why these men desired so strongly to slaughter tens of millions of people. I don't think that's justifiable, or even particularly interesting, and so I understand why for this game and this story, they decided to simply make them violent, cruel invaders who want nothing more than to slaughter and pillage and burn. It's not the most historically engaging, but none of this game actually is. From a narrative standpoint though, Kutan serves his purpose, but does no more than that. Confronting him had to happen because of course it did, but it's not that interesting or cathartic because Jin's fight against the Khan was more one of survival than one of great emotional or ideological depth. The fight itself is pretty fantastic. I think games like this can often drop the ball in the last second with all the mechanics being thrown out the window for a really boring fight that feels rubbish to play, but I think Ghost manages to balance all of its pieces. You have to prove yourself in a dynamic one-on-one fight against a larger group force when you're encouraged to use tools, and then a larger arena full of ranged enemies and more soldiers, all while juggling Kutan, who is changing his weapon on the fly, which means you need to adjust your stance accordingly. It's a culmination of everything you've learned across the game, and I think the atmosphere, the dynamism, and the structure bring it all together. I just think it's pretty wonderful to play. I will say though, like some of these moves in the duel are bullshit. Please tell me who designed this because I'd like to have a chat. Thanks. As the fights come to a close, Jin thrusts his blade through Kutan's torso area, and Kutan's final words are strangely, "We will be remembered," to which Jin responds,
No, you will be forgotten.
Which I personally think is really fucking funny. For a game that doesn't seem to give much of a shit about historical accuracy, they really had to throw in a line of dialogue to justify why this one relative of Genghis isn't remembered in history for some reason. I don't think this line really needed to exist, especially because Genghis and Kublai are both very much remembered, so it doesn't even work thematically. The Mongolian Empire was the second largest in history, and most all of its Khans are remembered too. I don't think this has a point to make, it's just really bizarre dialogue that feels like it's explaining why Kutan isn't known about, but the whole game is totally historically inaccurate anyway, and it also gives no reason why he'd be forgotten other than his failure to conquer Tsushima. Look man, it's just a weird choice. The Khan's boat explodes for some some reason, and Jin makes his way back to Yuna, who's reclaimed his ghost mask. Jin takes it back, a symbol that his identity is now fully enmeshed with that of the ghost, and they walk away into the distance as the game fades to black. Jin and Yuna have one last conversation. Shimura wants to meet Jin at the tree at Omi Lake where they used to spar when Jin was a child. Jin has to face him alone. He's his only family left. Yuna reflects on losing Taka, on how she's now alone. Jin responds that she has him, but she pushes back. He's the ghost, and he now belongs to everyone. I'm not sure if this is commenting on Jin's lack of personhood, or that he's become so entrenched in the symbol he's becoming that Jin no longer remains. I personally don't think that's the case. I think Jin always was this, and he's just now more sure of himself and his morals and ideals, so I'm not entirely sure I think this scene fits, especially given Yuna is one of the main people who helped him down this path. I don't disagree that the ghost is for everyone, but the way she delivers the line is a little let down or abandoned, which does feel a little bit strange to me. Heading to Omi Lake, we begin the epilogue, the true conclusion to Ghost of Tsushima's narrative, the very thing the game was exploring at its core. This final meeting is obvious. I think we all saw it coming, but the substance it carries is no less powerful because of that. The build-up to their final duel is slow and bubbling, and it explores a few different things. The first is that Clan Sakai has been dissolved by the Shogun, and Omi is no longer Jin's home. This is of course symbolic of the Shogun's obsession with honor and tradition, but also of Jin's assimilation by the people who need him. He transcends clans and banners now. I think it's clear here that both of these men care about Tsushima. Both of them also care about each other too, but there's an obvious difference in how they go about it. We meet a man on the road, his cart stuck in dirt. Jin and Shimura both stop to give him a hand. He's heading north to join the ghost, bringing food and supplies. Shimura doesn't stop him, but he clearly has reservations. The people back the ghost and not the samurai. It's clear, now and across the game, that the samurai have never done anything for the people. They claim protection of the people as a guise, a facade for their vanity, to pretend at good. The ghost, however, does what is necessary, gets his hands dirty, and the people admire that. Shimura doesn't really understand why, even now, and worries about a power shift, that the people won't fall in line after what the ghost has done, and I think that spells it out clear as day that Shimura, other lords, the Shogun, are worried about their power slipping, more than they have a concern for the people they claim to rule. I think the game uses the samurai as an allegory for unchecked power, and tries to comment on how the masses will often be corralled into submission, and that's something always worth combating, even if historically it's not accurately portraying the intricacies of the samurai. It is using their glorification in pop culture as a jumping off point and a basis to make a larger point, and I think that works. Interestingly here, Shimura says,
You taught our people to disobey their leaders. What makes you think your followers will obey you?
and the conversation ends here. We don't get to know what Jin thinks, but it makes for an interesting conversation because does Jin even agree that they need to obey him? Or is Shimura just assuming that based on his own worldview? We don't really get a picture of how Jin's status as the ghost continues after the Mongols are gone, and how it impacts the control of the samurai. You have to assume the logical conclusion would be that he slowly learns to understand the corruption that is fundamentally part of their rule, and vows to keep that in check, to be a counterbalance to their power so it doesn't spill into tyranny, although I might just be a bit too Assassin's Creed pilled, I can't lie. As they stand at the grave of Jin's father, we learn Shimura has been tasked with killing Jin for the Shogun, and so we begin our duel, but not before writing a haiku, the final words of Clan Sakai and Shimura. I think some people believe this is sort of writing to acknowledge the other after death, like whichever one wins can read the other at their funeral or something, but actually, I think it's because whichever one wins, both clans are gone. Sakai because it's been dissolved, whether Jin lives or dies, and Shimura because he saw Jin as a son, as his heir, and he no longer is, so whether Shimura lives or dies, his clan will die too. You could say that technically Shimura could have a kid, but I think the game establishes he put all his hopes into Jin and has essentially given up now. Logically, he can have an heir. Thematically, he won't. Their final spar of words conveys the game's central conflict.
You have no honor, and you are a slave to it.
The true enemy of Ghost of Tsushima is tradition, honor, rules, a lack of progress, and vanity. The fight itself is simple but engaging, especially on lethal, and feels like a pretty dramatic dance to cap off a game of bombastic battles. Here we get to make a choice though. Kill Shimura, or spare Shimura. This is one hell of a debated topic, and until just now writing this, I was stalwart in my feelings on sparing him, for the obvious reasons. Returning to honor and the samurai code in this final moment undoes his transformation into the ghost. It breaks the character arc here if Jin decides here to give in to tradition, a tradition that is going to end his uncle's life for literally no good reason. The only reason Jin would kill his uncle is out of samurai honor, something he no longer believes in. The ultimate moment of becoming the ghost is sparing his uncle's life and allowing him to live because he doesn't want to kill his family out of some twisted devotion to a set of rules that could have decimated his island and taken all he loved. Sparing Shimura shows that he will not bow to a set of rules that dictate he kill his uncle for no reason, despite his uncle willing to kill him because of the same. The game asks if you can remain true to your ideals, that progress is necessary even when the smoke is cleared and the war is over. Becoming the ghost was not a blip for convenience, it was Jin becoming a force for genuine change, and submitting to a code that stifles that evolution would be wrong. However, I stumbled upon an old comment on my original Ghost critique that made a compelling argument that has made me rethink this entire ending. I did also get sent an argument from a viewer recently too, which I did enjoy reading, but I think this comment kind of has the same sentiments, but it's just more concise, which makes it a bit better for this video. But thank you. Sorry, I can't do Dutch. Hold on, let me just...
Damn.
Thanks. Okay, so this comment goes, I'll put it like this. Denying Shimura his wish to die with honor because you don't believe in honor anymore is like not getting your relative on their deathbed a priest because you're an atheist. The choice isn't about Jin and his beliefs, it isn't about Jin at all. The last choice is asking the question if after all this, is Jin still a man of compassion, or will he treat his only remaining family with the same brutality as he does the Mongols? Of course, the irony being that spare is the brutal option, but since general audiences have been conditioned into believing that anything that keeps people alive is good, I doubt if even half of players looked beyond vicarious self-interest or that simplistic viewpoint. That's why honoring Shimura's request gives you pure white ghost armor and a beautiful moment between uncle and nephew, father and son, but sparing him makes it blood red and ends the game with a death vow. Because of all the people that Jin kills in the game, if he chooses to spare Lord Shimura, his death will be the most painful because he has to live with it. I think this argument does something key in turning me around on the kill Shimura ending that most arguments don't, and that's framing it as something Jin doesn't agree with. Most people argue that Jin would want to honor his uncle, that one last act of honor is the right thing to do and he'd feel it's right. But Jin does not agree with the samurai honor code. Killing his uncle would seem insane. However, like this person puts it, Jin killing Shimura is a moment of respect for someone who doesn't hold the same beliefs that he does, to give him this moment of peace out of kindness despite deeply thinking it's wrong. I've always seen killing Shimura as not understanding Jin's arc, but I think this person frames it in a way where it's Jin purposefully accepting his uncle's backwards views and respecting his right to hold them, and doing what he wants despite his own views differing, which is a type of acceptance the samurai never afforded him. I think usually people frame it as Jin killing Shimura because he agrees with killing him, but this person frames it as him killing him despite disagreeing with it, and I like that a lot more. And key is respecting his views when it doesn't impact the lives of anyone else. Shimura is allowed to believe dying with honor means something, but he doesn't get to push that onto everybody else, especially the younger men under his command. I think this kind of shows that both endings work in different ways. Maybe they're both kinda crucial to understanding Jin and what the ghost even is. The ending also makes it tough to follow up to give us any real insight into what Jin did, although I have to imagine his legacy lives on, maybe not as Jin Sakai, but maybe as the Ghost of Tsushima. I said earlier I try not to date these videos with talk of the sequels or speculation, but this one will be fun because we can look back and see if I got anything right. But if I were writing Yotei, which I'm not by the way for anyone wondering, I think this is how I would handle it. The game is called Ghost of Yotei. Clearly Atsu is also a ghost. If she becomes that absent of any connection to Jin, then I think that's really bizarre. Is Ghost just a franchise where lots of random Japanese people were called Ghost of Place they were born? That feels like wasted potential. I think Atsu being the Ghost of Yotei should come from the legend of a ghost that existed a long time ago, but maybe her perception of what the ghost is more vengeful than about justice, and over the course of the game, wielding the name of the ghost with her anger, she at some point comes to learn what Jin fought for, why he became the ghost, and that she has been perverting that memory, and instead learns to fight for something larger than just herself. Maybe they'll do that, maybe they won't, maybe there'll be some elements, who knows, but I think that's probably what I would do. We don't need to know heaps about Jin, but I think the Ghost of Tsushima legacy needs to be integral. Otherwise, why is it even the name of the franchise? feels a little weird to place the DLC chapter after the conclusion of the game's story. This isn't a Forbidden West situation where it's the perfect epilogue that obviously continues the main game's story. It's an awkward one. I like how Ghost leaves its open world. I've been on the record many times that open world games that revert to pre-last mission states after the credits are bad, and I hate them on the most subjective and personal level possible. You pick up at Tradition's End, very cool name for a final location, where Jin now lives, alone, with mementos.
Oh, looking cool!
I like this a lot. It's cute. The thing with Icky Island is that it can be started as soon as you begin Act 2. I mean, I accidentally did just that, which is kind of embarrassing, and so it's not super clear when it takes place. There are elements of it that work during the story, such as how everyone keeps calling you samurai despite me looking absolutely nothing like a samurai, but there's also elements that work post-game, such as Jin coming to terms truly with the death of his father and thereby Clan Sakai, as well as the little visions you can see tying into things that happen across the game, like Taka's death or the loss of Sora that wouldn't be present if you'd started this during Act 2. I'm torn on when it thematically feels best to tackle, and by the end I think actually maybe I lean closer to during Act 2, but then pacing-wise it feels super bizarre given your current tasks with Yarikawa and not even telling Shimura what you're doing before you do it, and it never being brought up, which logically feels like it exists after the main story, so it's kind of split in that way. I think DLC generally, in games like this, usually work better when it's after the main story. It's why I think thematically and narratively, Burning Shores is better than Frozen Wilds, even if from every other angle it's probably worse, and why if you're going to do DLC that's just assimilated into the main game, it probably needs to work the way it's done in Kingdom Come Deliverance or Fallout, where it's just kind of an additional side quest line to follow that doesn't particularly fit anywhere and doesn't need to. This doesn't ruin Icky Island, though. Not at all. I think Icky Island is probably Ghost at its very best. The core reason is because of how it kind of remedies all of the issues that were picked up by Act 2 and 3, and how it perfects what Act 1 began. It gives back purpose and intrigue and meaning to the world you're exploring in a host of ways that are engaging, interesting, and provide narrative or character depth. For a start, often exploration isn't always icon-based. There are sometimes things you can stumble across, from environmental cues, which is already an improvement over the best of the base game, but on top of this, despite still heading to question marks to check them off, the balancing and variety is changed, but so is the reason that you do them. Bandit camps are the most similar, other than haikus and hot springs, but they are far lesser than in the main game. They don't dominate the map in a way that makes them a slog. They are simply engaging camps to clear that are all unique and don't overstay their welcome. It's a perfect amount to leave you satisfied, but not tired of it. On top of that, there are new things, which brings back the feeling of intrigue, animal sanctuaries and memories of Jin's past, something that looks to perhaps be returning in Yotei. The sanctuaries allow us moments of respite for Jin to reconnect with nature, similar to the haikus, with a little flute minigame you have to play, which, like, it's lame, but it's cute. I'm not hating on this. It feels like something from 2005, and I kind of love that. But after, you get a moment for Jin to recount his past, stories of his mother, someone who is briefly mentioned in Tsushima, but here gets a lot more depth. Jin recalls times when they'd skip class, when he'd spent time with her on calmer things, being in nature, reading, just talking, all the things he wasn't able to do with his father. These act as moments for him to embrace the side of him that was Jin Sakai, and he does that through his mother, rather than his father. I said this earlier, right at the top of the video, that Yuna being female felt important, and I think Icky Island brings that back around. Jin very obviously was at odds with his father and his uncle. Jin's outlook on the world wasn't the harsh, aggressive, and stubborn one that is characterized by Kazumasa and Shimura. He always felt a stronger connection to characters like Yuriko and his mother. Jin has too much empathy for his people. He just uses the tools given to him by his samurai upbringing to act on them and become the ghost. There's no certainty as to whether his mother would necessarily be proud of his actions. She might condemn them altogether, but there's no doubt that his decision to do what needs to be done to help people, instead of simply following his father and uncle for the sake of it, was inspired by his time with his mother. And I think Yuna ignites that flame of empathy again, one he'd been trying so hard to bury since his mother's death. To be the man he was meant to be. Once connecting with Yuna, once becoming the man he was always going to be, he's able to reconnect with his mother, and I think that's really beautiful. In direct opposition to this, you've got the memories of your father, Jin recalling the invasion of Icky Island by Clan Sakai, the trip that killed his father. There are several memories, and all of them speak to Jin's disconnect from his father, from taking issue with his cruel ways, the slaughter of the farm people who were harboring raiders, or the only time he ever felt like he was his father's son when he asked him to play the flute for him, which hurts hurts really bad, Jin not being able to express himself. It tells the tale of a constant suppression of self that adds greater depth to the actions we see him take during the main game. But you also see ways he is similar to his father, saying how he felt alive in battle, to which Kazumasa responds that that's who Clan Sakai is.
We are the lightning in the storm, the avalanche that topples a mountain. That is Clan Sakai.
I understand, Father.
And it feels very much like words that do still guide Jin across the main game, to be the lightning in the storm. I think it's compelling that their relationship is so torn rather than black and white. It gives Jin greater depth as the ghost, being molded by so much nuanced experience. There's a plethora of new things to find and complete too, even this one where Sony acknowledged Bloodborne is actually a game that exists for once, but they all work to create a sense of discovery that is not found in the main game past Act 2 by giving us new things and making them feel narratively rewarding. Not to mention, the side quests are actually interesting this time around, which is insane. They aren't revolutionary, but they're probably what the main game should have been. They're more careful and specific and play directly into the core theming of the DLC and how they tackle themes of moral ambiguity, choice, legacy, and changing from who you once were, all things that Jin experiences here. And I think that's very good stuff. Like I said, it's not revolutionary, and I do hope moving forward they can try to write genuinely compelling stories with genuinely interesting characters, but these are far and away superior to the base game. You also have unwritten tales. These are smaller quests that you can find just by exploring, once again helping to negate the question mark issue. You can discover these small stories and tasks by just wandering the world and naturally bumping into them. They're still tied to a trophy, which kind of ends up forcing completionists to check online to find where they are, but on a regular playthrough, not cursed by aggressive OCD, they work really well to remedy more issues I had with exploration and quests in the core game. And another crazy thing they did is they made shrines actually fun. Sure, I guess in the main game, swinging between some of the branches could feel nice, but now they're actually engaging. They work as mini puzzles within the confines of the often shallow climbing system. They manage to use the limitations of what's there to create something that feels rewarding when you explore these different nooks and crannies, you figure out the best way to get across, and using the new pull down with the grapple move you can do to open up new paths. It's actually kind of insane how much better they feel to play. I'm still kind of in shock they managed to do this, to be honest with you. And so thanks to all of this, Iki Island ends up the strongest we've seen the Ghost formula, and I think that's really wonderful. It shows that what they were trying to do can work, and that they are improving based on experience developing this series. I can only imagine that Yotei takes this further still and into deeply unique territory. Iki Island is narratively a trip into the past. It's into Jin's memories, and that's done by the new faction of the Mongols led by the Eagle, who once again, similarly to Kutan Khan, is depthless and boring, but she facilitates Jin's journey, which is the core of the story here. Iki Island was subject to the invasion of Clan Sakai when Jin was a child, and it's where Kazumasa died, a moment that still haunts Jin, trauma he is yet to unpack, the same as so much that happened across the game. The Eagle and her tribe use a new type of hallucinogenic poison to create visions. She uses it to control her men, and she uses it on Jin. So for the length of this DLC, you are plagued with visions, which could become annoying if they weren't so narratively integral. The visions work as a way for Jin to confront the trauma and guilt he harbors inside of himself. To take out the Eagle and save Iki and thereby Tsushima, he has to join forces with the Iki Island Raiders, the same group that killed his father all those years ago. And so right off the bat, we've got a perfect boiling pot of character drama, and I think this works so wonderfully as a motivator for the player. After getting to know Jin and his morals and ideals, we get to explore him internally. Not in a weird way though. I said earlier they call you Samurai, and they do, so Jin has to adopt a new name. Instead of Sakai, he is Jin from Yarikawa, which is a really nice piece of symbolism. To take the name from the clan that Shimura once quelled the rebellion from is meaningful given his stance opposite Shimura across the game. It is interesting though that despite the Sakai armor being covered up for this DLC so you don't give away your identity, you can still just openly wear the Ghost outfit, which has the Sakai sigil on the cape. I guess you just gotta hope that Tenzo and the boys aren't looking at that, or maybe that's how they realize who Jin is. That'd make sense, right? The entire story is about Jin getting to know the Raiders, to understand and experience their lives, to realize even more than he probably already did, how what the samurai did here was wrong, and that it wasn't to help the island at all, but to bring it under their boot, something Jin actively fights against, yet again bringing in a critique of the samurai. We experience through the memories and dialogue just how gruesome Kazumasa's acts were, and Tenzo himself explains in detail after the battle, finding his friend's body among the dead. He didn't find his head until a week later. Kazumasa and the samurai ravaged this island, and Jin struggles to come to terms with that, to admit that it was all wrong and never should have happened, that his father's death was maybe correct. We learn soon after that Tenzo is the one who killed Kazumasa. He spoke the words that echo in Jin's memory, "May your death benefit all beings." The idea that the death of his own father could not just be desired but beneficial to the people of Iki is difficult to process, but that is the core of what he needs to process. Jin continues to do what he does, but he's never confronted himself on what it means to be Jin Sakai. He ignores it, pushes it down, and this, here with Tenzo, forces him to stand face to face with it. This all comes to a head in the final fight with the eagle, a stupid, dumb fight that I hate and switch to easy mode to beat. Come at me in the comments, I dare you, I'll switch our argument on easy mode and trounce you. You've been warned. Being lured back to the spot where Jin's father was killed, we defeat the eagle in combat, but also within our mind. I don't really understand why Jin is able to mentally defeat the poison. I don't think that's how poison works, but we're gonna allow it for now because of how it works thematically. At first, Jin has to appeal to the raiders, asking Tenzo to tell Fune, their leader, he's not his father. If he was, Tenzo would be dead. But later, I think genuinely begins to believe it. He slowly comes to terms across the story and through the optional memories that he is not his father, and that's for good reason. When he confronts the eagle, there is a great line that sharpens this reflection.
I don't soar over my people. I serve them.
This lands as a direct rebuke to everything Kazumasa stood for. Even when Jin admits in the internalized confrontation with the image of his father that lives in his head that Kazumasa did what he needed to do on the battlefield, he condemns him in the same breath for failing everywhere else. Jin apologizes for letting him down, and Kazumasa says not just him, but all of Clan Sakai.
When we lost your mother, I was left with a son I didn't know how to help. So, I raised a samurai.
I think it's here that the dam breaks, and Jin understands in himself what he has to do to heal, to move on. Kazumasa tells Jin to strike down the raider, to rid their clan of shame and defeat, to which Jin says, no.
I will never be like you. The way you lived was not my choice. And your death was not my fault.
I think it's a really nice mirror of how he rejects Shimura at the end of Act 2. It's this direct and absolute condemnation of Kazumasa that concludes this arc. He recognizes Kazumasa did what needed to be done on the battlefield, but he rejects the idea that cruelty is an acceptable tool. Kazumasa may have done things differently to Shimura, but he still acted to a similar end and for similar reasons. He didn't do what he did on Iki to benefit the people, he did it for himself, for ego and legacy and renown, for power. Jin refuses both of these men, Kazumasa and Shimura, adhering to rules that only serve lords and doing your own thing in service of yourself. Jin serves his people, and that's the core difference. Jin spent a lot of time running from who he was, but here I think he accepts it. You don't escape legacy by pretending it isn't there. You escape it by redefining it and making it your own. Everything he experienced as a child, everything he learned, both positive and negative, from his mother and father, makes him who he is. And those things don't define him, only what he does with it. His final words as he saves Tenzo, where he failed to save his father, punctuate it all.
May your death benefit all beings.
He accepts what happened to his father needed to happen, and wields it now himself. Sometimes, as much as it's hard, people have to die for things to change. And symbolically, this is the true last words of Clan Sakai, as Jin moves forward, confident in the man his father's death made him into. Ghost of Tsushima is a good game. It's often a really great game, but it's stifled by a whole plethora of flaws that make the experience messy and disjointed. Its narrative never wavers. I think it's always really strong, despite not being revolutionary, but the structure and pacing of its world is really what holds it back from being truly special. Which is funny, because in Act 1, I'd say it was truly special. It's Act 2 and 3 that are the death blow. But like I said at the top, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Ghost is fun despite its flaws, and a game worth your time despite the parts that can feel like they're wasting it. and that makes it so ripe for a sequel more than games that are a 10 out of 10 right out of the gate. I think that Ghost is one of those kind of middling games that I'll always remember fondly, and I can only hope, with time since its release and the indication of change in Icky Island, that future Ghost games overcome the flaws and adapt, breaking from open world tradition more and more to forge a new path of innovation for the genre. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope you enjoyed. And a big thank you to everybody supporting me on Patreon. The Patreon companion video for this one won't be up alongside this. I just haven't had the fucking time. It's been insane. I've been working on this video solidly for the past month and trying my absolute darndest to get it out before Yotei, and I have done it. Well, I mean, this could all go completely wrong. I don't know. I'm recording this on the 27th of September, so everything could go tits up, but I hope that it won't. But the video I'm doing on Tsushima Legends, which will be the companion video, will be up in, like, I don't know, hopefully a few days. Hopefully it doesn't take me too long to make, but yeah, it should be a little bit later than this one. And I apologize, it's probably a little annoying, more for me than you, probably. But just know that I can't do the classic, oh, if you're watching this video, there's one up on Patreon right now, because there isn't. But there will be in a few days. And of course, thank you to my producers and master assassins. I have your names here, by the way, this time. Holy shit, look at me. Prepared. And also, this is so close to releasing the video that there's no way this list will change. If it does, I can't help you. Thank you to Adam Barnes, Arenathon, Cabbage, Callum Thefmus Kelly, Commenter25, Damien, the Not-So-Orange Gnome, Dink, GeekFam, Johnny Nelson, Luke Pierce, Rolands, Tyler Half, and Zedda. Thank you all so much for your continued support as producers and master assassins. Thank you to everybody else who continues to support me on Patreon. It is insane. I couldn't imagine this kind of support a couple of years ago, and it's kind of wild that I'm, you know, able to sustain myself, and Patreon is a huge part of that. And we're very, very close to hitting the milestone for the AC3 video now. As of recording this, I'm literally 2 away, but it does keep going up to, like, very close, and then dipping back down by, like, 10, and then going back up, and then, you know, every few days. So, you know, if some of you could just stick around for a bit and not cancel your sub for, like, a week, we'd have hit it. We'd have hit the number. But it's better for me, really, that I don't have to add that to the bottom of my queue, that I can focus on my things without thinking, oh, I've got to make that big fucking behemoth of a video. But, you know, and for that one, too, when I eventually do make that, I'm thinking that's the one I'm going to want to document, because it's going to be a huge video. It's going to be, you know, bigger than my AC4 video, probably, at least in terms of scope, maybe not length, although who really knows. But there's going to be a lot of research that goes into it, because the historical period, again, is very important in Assassin's Creed 3, and I'd like to know about it, and I know very little about the American Revolution, so I'm going to have to do a lot of reading into that. But not just the Revolution, also the history of the native people that lived in the area, because that's a major component of the game. I'd say that's 50% of the historical setting, is understanding who Connor is, his tribe, where they come from, and, you know, their customs and history, because that's incredibly important. And I'm going to have to dissect that, the revolution itself, the history of, you know, why the colonies were founded, and Britain itself, and also colonization. Fuck, I can't even say it. I'm gonna have to talk about it, though. It's gonna be a heavy video with a lot going on, and it's all gonna have to tie back into how the game uses those components in its setting and the subject matters for its theming and character work. It's gonna be a lot. And also, I'm gonna have to play AC3 again, so that's the worst part. So this was a really fun video to make, though. It was nice to test myself, to give myself that kind of, you know, the deadlines, and have it be really regimented for once. Because I've spent the last 2 years kind of being like, you know what? I'm just going to make what I want, when I want, and go on vibes. But this time I was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to do this one like a job. I'm going to give myself deadlines. I'm going to give myself exactly when I want things to be done. That's what a deadline is. And I'm going to get this out by this day. And I did miss the deadline. I'm recording this outro bit. The video is edited other than the camera stuff. My deadline was the 26th. It is the 27th. I mean, I don't think it's too bad, right? I did a pretty good job getting there. I bashed out Ghost of Tsushima in like 5 days. I put 60 hours into that thing over 5 days. It was obscene, actually. I don't do gaming like that anymore. I just don't. It's not how I play games, so it's kind of crazy that I did that. I'd like to do it again with something. I think it's fun to give myself those deadlines, but I also need to make sure I give myself ample breaks, and maybe the deadline should be something like 6 weeks rather than 4 weeks, because it's been very tight. 6 weeks would be a little bit better, but also still, you know, sticking to my plans. So I am obviously going to play Yotei. I don't know what form the video will take. My idea was that I would just decide, like I did with Ragnarok, like I just played it and then decided what I thought and what the video should be, and it ended up being whatever it was, right? Which will probably be what I'll do with this. There's no real idea in my head of what the video will be, whether it will be like a harsh, scathing critique, or whether it'll be like a balanced video, whether it will be, oh, this game's underrated and everyone's fucking talking shit about it when it's actually really, really good and you're all wrong and dumb. You know, it'll be one of those three, and I'll make it start of next year. I want to give myself time to absorb it and think about it rather than trying to rush one out, because by the time I'm like done with the game and then making the script, it'll be a push to get it out before like the Christmas period, and I really want to take some time off this December. So my plan is try and do something else during October, a different kind of video that I would like to sort of put together, maybe Cars 3. I'm not going to, you know, confirm or deny though. And then get the end of the year video and Christmas related video on an unspecified game ready and finished for December, so that I can just take a few weeks to just actually enjoy Christmas for once. I feel like I've not enjoyed the festive period in years. To be able to just relax, do some fun Christmassy things, you know, with Elva, with my family. It would be so nice. I need it, man. It would be great. But I'm gonna, you know, prepare for that. So go on a bit of a grind, get some stuff done and put some things together, but I'm looking forward to it, so that's cool. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all so much for your continued support. The support on the Open Mods video was outstanding. I really appreciate that. It was really nice to see all the comments and kind words and people being like, oh, you just keep getting better and better at writing and things like that. That was a common sentiment, and that really means a lot to me to hear, because sometimes I think that I write shit. Like sometimes I read my scripts back and I'm like, god damn, this sucks. But you know, I'll have Elva read parts, or people on Discord read parts, or whatever else, and it kind of, you know, puts my mind at ease, and I'm like, okay, I guess it is pretty good. And then, you know, so many people leaving comments, it reinforces that, it gives me motivation. I'm like, okay, actually, it was good. I was reading it too much, that it kind of got a bit boring. So, yeah. But I'm really pleased with that video, and I'm really pleased with this video, and I'm yeah, weirdly, like, it's been a weird couple years with the house move and different things going on in my life that's been made, like, things have been a bit rocky here and there for me, sort of like, you know, mentally. And so videos have kind of taken a hit because of all that, but I'm still really happy with the stuff that I've made and where the channel is at, and, you know, the fact that I'm able to do this still in the way that I am, and be more creative than I ever have been, and really express myself in these things more than I ever have before. It means a lot, so I really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you enjoy the future ones too. I think that's it, and I will let you go. Have a good day, evening, night, morning, wherever you are, and I will see you soon for something new. Obviously, stuff always going up on Patreon too, so if you want more stuff, that's where to go. And there's a whole back catalog. If you've never pledged to Patreon, god, that shit is like a fucking gold mine. If you like me, if you don't, it's not. But if you do, it is like a gold mine. I can't imagine opening up that Patreon, not being a member, and being like, holy shit, all of this? It's a lot of stuff. In terms of Patreon-only videos, there's currently 29. And there's a couple more coming, like the companion video to this, and then also the monthly video for September as well. So there's going to be 31 in like a matter of, you know, a week. And every time I do a main channel video, there is a companion piece over there, and I do one exclusive video a month as well, which are lower effort stuff. Don't get me wrong, they're not highly edited essays or anything, but they are, you know, on interesting topics as voted on by members of Patreon as well. So it's, you know, a nice little community gathering, and we do some interesting stuff. So I'm really happy with it. And on top of that, there are, you know, heaps of old podcasts and old content, as well as the Jazz Lounge and commentaries that I do on new pieces of media as well. So there's a lot going on over there. So it's well worth it, just for the, you know, the price of admission, I think, personally. But, you know, I'm biased, so maybe just ask someone else. And yeah, look, that's it, I think. Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you very soon. Bye.